The ruby slippers that disappeared. The Wizard of Oz. 1939. They were only meant to sparkle under studio lights for a few fleeting scenes. Yet, over time, they became one of the most valuable pieces of Hollywood history and one of its most mysterious disappearances. When The Wizard of Oz premiered in 1939, the Technicolor fantasy stunned audiences. The moment Judy Garland's Dorothy stepped into a world somewhere over the rainbow, her shoes became the film's most iconic image, glittering ruby slippers that carried her down the yellow brick road. But like much of classic Hollywood, what we saw on screen was only part of the story. The slippers were not made of rubies, of course. MGM's costume designer Gilbert Adrian crafted them from plain pumps, covered in a deep red silk fail fabric and hand-sewn sequins. The bows were adorned with red glass jewels and bugle beads. In reality, several pairs were made for filming, each slightly different in size and detail to endure the demands of long production days. After filming wrapped, the shoes quietly returned to MGM's costume department, joining thousands of other wardrobe pieces that would be reused, altered, or forgotten. The studio had no idea these would one day be priceless. In fact, for decades, props like these were considered expendable. It wasn't until the 1970 MGM auction in Culver City, when the studio sold off vast portions of its backlot, sets, and costumes, that one pair of ruby slippers emerged into public view. That pair sold for a modest $15,000 to a private collector. Over the years, other pairs surfaced, one at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History, another in private hands, and a third acquired by memorabilia collector Michael Shaw. Shaw's pair toured exhibits around the country until August 2005. In the quiet early morning hours, someone broke into the Judy Garland Museum in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, where Shaw had loaned the slippers. They smashed the glass display case, took the shoes, and left behind almost no clues. The theft shocked not only collectors, but also fans of The Wizard of Oz. The ruby slippers had vanished, and with them, a piece of cinematic magic. For years, the trail went cold. Rumors circulated that they had been destroyed, that they were hidden in a private vault, even that they'd been sold on the black market to a shadowy collector. The FBI got involved, but leads dried up. Shaw continued to hope for their return, telling reporters they belong to everyone who loves the film. Then, in 2018, 13 years after the theft, the FBI announced a breakthrough. Maltese Falcon that wasn't just a prop. 1941. In The Maltese Falcon, Humphrey Bogart's Sam Spade spends the entire film chasing a mysterious black bird, a jewel-encrusted statue worth a fortune, steeped in legend and betrayal. In the real world, one of the prop falcons became just as elusive, vanishing into private hands and sparking legal battles worthy of its own film noir. John Huston's 1941 adaptation of Dashiell Hammett's novel became a cornerstone of the genre. For the centerpiece of the story, the falcon itself, Warner Brothers commissioned multiple props. At least 2 were cast in lead and painted black, each weighing over 45 pounds, and a lighter plaster version was made for scenes where actors needed to carry it more easily. The lead versions were used for static shots, giving them a heft and solidity that made the bird seem truly valuable. The main hero falcon had small nicks in its surface, caused accidentally during filming when it was dropped. Those imperfections became crucial decades later in proving its authenticity. After filming wrapped, the props went back into Warner Brothers' property department. For years, they sat unremarked among thousands of other objects. But unlike most studio props, the Maltese Falcon's mystique grew. In 1980, one of the lead versions resurfaced now in private hands and was sold at auction for a then remarkable $4,000. Over the years, its value skyrocketed as collectors began viewing it not just as a movie memento, but as a physical embodiment of noir history. Another lead falcon emerged in the possession of actor William Conrad, known for Cannon and Jake and the Fat Man. Conrad said he had acquired it from Warner Brothers, and when he passed away in 1994, the bird was sold to a private collector. That same year, a third claimant stepped forward, a man named Gary Milan, asserting he had found a falcon in a studio sale decades earlier. The competing claims over which bird was the falcon fueled headlines. By the 2002, the intrigue deepened. Bonham's auction house authenticated one lead falcon as having been used on screen, citing the famous Nix as proof. In 2013, it sold for an astonishing $4,085,000, one of the highest prices ever paid for a film prop. Not every falcon story ended in such grandeur. One plaster version was stolen from the offices of producer, director David O. Selznick in the 1972nd and has never been found. Others, possibly unmarked studio copies, may still sit on forgotten shelves or in storage boxes, their significance unrecognized. The real poetry of the Maltese falcon lies in how life imitates art. The Ten Commandments Lost City, 1956. In 1923, famed director Cecil B. DeMille stood on the sun-scorched dunes of the Guadalupe-Nipomo Dunes in California and created a city fit for Pharaoh. Towering statues, massive sphinxes, and monumental gates rose from the sand, all for his silent-era epic, The Ten Commandments. But when filming ended, he made an extraordinary decision. He buried the entire set. DeMille feared rival filmmakers would reuse the grand Egyptian facades, diluting the scale and majesty he had created. So rather than dismantle them or cart them away, he ordered everything over 20 sphinxes, giant plaster columns, whole temples to be broken apart and buried under the sand. It was a cinematic time capsule, sealed beneath the dunes. For decades, the story of the lost city of DeMille lingered as a piece of old Hollywood folklore, romantic, mysterious, but largely forgotten. The 1956, The Ten Commandments, also directed by DeMille, was a Technicolor spectacle that replaced the original in public memory. Meanwhile, the 1923 version and its buried set faded into myth, but the legend never fully disappeared. In the early 1980s, a group of local historians, artists, and archaeologists, led by Peter Brosnan, began investigating the site. A tip from a film historian had pointed them toward the dunes, where rumors of buried Hollywood treasures had long persisted. What they discovered stunned them. Fragments of plaster, statue heads, and ornate columns still poking from the sands. They had found DeMille's city. The team began working to excavate the site. But the process was slow and difficult. The location was part of a protected ecological reserve, making excavation complicated and costly. Shifting sands and extreme weather also posed a challenge. Some of the remaining pieces had been crushed under tons of dune pressure. In 2012, nearly 90 years after it was buried, one of the largest sphinx heads, 300 pounds of crumbling plaster, was successfully unearthed. The excavation made headlines around the world. The team, now operating as the Dune Center, began carefully preserving the artifacts, many of which were too fragile to move far. In a 1927 autobiography, DeMille had written, "If, 1,000 years from now, archaeologists happen to dig beneath the sands of Guadalupe, I hope they will not rush into print with the amazing news that Egyptian civilization extended all the way to the Pacific coast of North America." Marilyn Monroe's white subway dress, The 7-Year Itch, 1955. It's one of the most famous moments in cinema history. Marilyn Monroe standing over a New York subway grate, her white halter dress billowing upward as she laughs in surprise. Captured in The 7-Year Itch, 1955, the image became not only the defining shot of the film, but an emblem of Monroe's screen presence. The dress itself, however, would go on to have a story as dramatic as any film script, one of fame, disappearance, and record-breaking rediscovery. The dress was designed by William Travilla, who had created costumes for Monroe in several films, including Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. For The 7-Year Itch, Travilla envisioned a light, pleated ivory crepe halter dress that would glow under the city's nightlights. The famous scene was shot on the 15th of September, 1954 in Manhattan, drawing a huge crowd and dozens of photographers. Although much of what made it into the final cut was reshot on a Hollywood soundstage, the location shoot cemented the dress in public memory. After filming, the dress returned to Travilla's private collection. Travilla, known for being protective of his work, kept many of Monroe's costumes carefully stored. When he passed away in 1990, the collection eventually came into the possession of actress Debbie Reynolds, who had been amassing one of the largest collections of Hollywood memorabilia in the world. Reynolds' collection, however, faced a sad reality. Preserving and storing thousands of costumes was enormously expensive. In 2011, she made the difficult decision to auction much of it. In June 2011, Monroe's white halter dress went up for sale at Profiles in History in California. The bidding was intense, with collectors from around the globe vying for a piece of Hollywood legend. It ultimately sold for $4.6 million, far exceeding its pre-auction estimates. The buyer's identity remained private, and the dress disappeared into a secure, climate-controlled vault. The sale ensured its preservation, but it also meant the dress was no longer in public view. For costume historians, the gown's significance lay not only in its cinematic moment, but also in its craftsmanship. Travilla's design was deceptively simple, its pleats and fabric chosen to move perfectly with the slightest air current. Even without Monroe, the garment had a life of its own. In later interviews, Reynolds reflected on her decision to part with the piece. Gone with the Wind's missing curtain dress, 1939. In Gone with the Wind, Scarlett O'Hara is a woman who refuses to be defeated by circumstance. In one of the film's most memorable moments, she transforms green velvet curtains into a gown, a defiant gesture to preserve her dignity and charm in the face of hardship. The costume became one of cinema's most recognizable symbols of resourcefulness. But the real-life journey of the dress was almost as dramatic as Scarlett's own. The gown was designed by Walter Plunkett, the legendary costume designer behind the film's elaborate wardrobe. Plunkett worked closely with Vivien Leigh to ensure that each outfit reflected Scarlett's emotional state. For the curtain dress, he used green velvet embellished with gold fringe, making it appear heavy and luxurious, as though it could truly have been pulled from a plantation window. Two primary versions of the dress were made for filming, one for full-length shots and another for action scenes. After filming wrapped in 1939, the costumes were stored by David O. Selznick's production company. Over time, many Gone with the Wind costumes were loaned for publicity appearances, exhibitions, and even repurposed for other productions, a common practice in the studio era. By the 1972nd, however, the whereabouts of the curtain dress became uncertain. Pieces of Gone with the Wind wardrobe began turning up in private collections, but the green velvet gown remained elusive. In the 1982nd, the dress surfaced in less than ideal condition, its velvet faded and its seams frayed from decades of improper storage. It had reportedly been kept in a private collection for years without climate control. In 2010, the dress made headlines when it was put up for auction by Heritage Auctions. It sold for $137,000 to a private buyer, but its fragile state raised concerns among preservationists. The once rich green fabric had turned a dull olive, and the gold fringe had lost much of its luster. Costume historians feared that without immediate restoration, the gown would continue to deteriorate. In 2014, the dress was donated to the Harry Ransom Center at the University of Texas at Austin, home to one of the most comprehensive collections of Gone with the Wind memorabilia. There, textile conservators began the painstaking process of restoring the gown. This was not about making it look new. It was about stabilizing it so future generations could see the costume in as close to its original form as possible. Conservators cleaned the fabric delicately, reinforced weak seams, and carefully documented every repair. The work was slow, sometimes taking weeks just to address a few inches of stitching. But the results were remarkable. Under controlled lighting, the velvet's green tones once again suggested the opulence that Scarlett O'Hara would have wanted to project. The curtain dress is now preserved in archival storage, brought out occasionally for exhibitions. Standing before it, viewers can see not only a piece of Hollywood history, but also the evidence of time's passage, the wear, the fading, the fragility. It's a reminder that even the most iconic costumes are, at their core, just fabric and thread, vulnerable to the same decay as anything else. Vivien Leigh, when asked about Scarlett's resilience, once said, "She was a survivor. That's the one thing I liked about her." The curtain dress has survived too through neglect, rediscovery, and restoration. The Singin' in the Rain lamppost. Rain falls in silver sheets. Gene Kelly swings around a lamppost, and a simple street corner becomes one of the most joyful scenes in cinematic history. The Singin' in the Rain lamppost wasn't designed to be a relic. It was just another piece of the MGM backlot, but the moment it shared with Kelly turned it into an icon. When Singin' in the Rain was released in 1952, it was already considered a nostalgic look back at Hollywood's transition from silent films to talkies. The now famous lamppost scene was choreographed by Kelly himself. It took place on a carefully constructed street set on MGM's Lot 2-inch Culver City, under rain created by a mixture of water and milk, the milk added to make the rain visible on camera under the hot studio lights. The lamppost was not a custom build. Like most studio props of the time, it was a standard street light, likely sourced from the prop department's collection of municipal fixtures. It was bolted into the set sidewalk to withstand Kelly's athletic choreography. The crew ensured that the surrounding pavement was slightly elevated and angled to drain the heavy flow of water used for the scene. After filming wrapped, the lamppost returned to MGM's general prop inventory. No one could have guessed that, decades later, people would want to know exactly where it was. In the 1962nd and 72nd, as the old MGM backlots were sold off or demolished, many props were discarded or sold without documentation. For years, film historians speculated whether the original lamppost had survived. Some believed it had been removed and installed on a backlot street at Warner Brothers. Others thought it had been scrapped entirely. Then, in the 1982nd, reports emerged of a lamppost on the MGM lot being quietly set aside after staff recognized it from Singin' in the Rain. It was eventually relocated to a storage area used by the studio's art department. Its confirmed identification came much later, thanks to comparisons between the base and armature seen in the 1952 film and archival photographs from MGM's prop catalog. Subtle details such as the pattern of bolts on the base plate and the curve of the lamp's arm matched exactly. Today, at least one lamppost believed to be from the original set, the piano from Casablanca, 1942. Of all the props in all the films in Hollywood history, few carry as much romance and nostalgia as a small cream-colored piano from Casablanca. It was the one where Dooley Wilson as Sam played As Time Goes By for Humphrey Bogart's Rick and Ingrid Bergman's Ilsa. Its notes carried the weight of memory, love, and loss. Yet for decades, the piano itself seemed destined to wander, much like the characters who leaned on it. When Casablanca was shot at Warner Brothers in 1942, the piano was just another studio prop, compact, upright, painted cream with decorative panels, and modified to hold hidden compartments. In one scene, it concealed letters of transit that would determine the character's fate. The instrument was not a full grand. It was chosen specifically to fit into the tight layout of Rick's Café Américain and to allow the camera close access to the actors. Dooley Wilson, who portrayed Sam, was not actually playing during filming. He was a drummer by training. The music was performed off-screen by pianist Elliot Carpenter, and Wilson mimed the performance with remarkable conviction. Still, the piano became inseparable from the image of Wilson's hands gliding across the keys as Bogart murmured, "Play it, Sam, play, as time goes by." After filming, the piano returned to Warner Brothers' property department. Like so many props, it was reused in other productions, sometimes repainted or altered. By the 1982nd, it had been sold to a private collector, its identity as the Casablanca piano known only to a handful of people. In 1988, the piano surfaced at a Sotheby's auction, where it sold for $154,000, a substantial figure at the time for a film prop. But its journey didn't end there. In 2014, it returned to the auction block, this time at Bonham's in New York. The piano, still painted cream and bearing its distinctive Art Deco-style panels, was accompanied by extensive documentation confirming its screen use. The sale attracted global attention. Collectors and institutions competed fiercely, drawn by the piano's combination of cinematic history and emotional resonance. It ultimately sold for $3.4 million to an anonymous buyer, a testament to how a simple studio prop had transformed into a treasured artifact of cultural memory.